Hey, and welcome to this edition of the Integration Podcast. So, one of the things that, we're at the end of the year. I got my small Nissa, as we call in Danish, out, and we're ready to close off for the year. But that also means that we'll soon start on a new year, and I know a lot of people are planning to do migration and conversions in the new year. So I just wanted to give you my ideas about how these things can be done, what you can take away, and how these things should be approached. So thanks for joining here. So actually I have a few things that I'd like to share with you. So I think the first one is you need to figure out what type of conversion migration that you're actually doing, and there's obviously quite a few different ones where it makes sense, and I think you need to figure out which one of these you're doing. So I think the most complicated ones that is out there is the dual stack to a single stack migration, and this makes sense no matter what you're doing because the dual stack has a lot of overhead, has some downside and challenges that makes it not really desirable. So that is one thing I would like to get away from. And also, if you look at the future roadmap, it's not anything that has been developed for the last 3, 4, 5 years, maybe even more. And also, if you look in the future, it may not even be there. So that is definitely something I would recommend you to get away from. And then obviously there is some customers that have the dual stack, but it's just using plain ICOs for all the matters. I think in that perspective, one of the things I've heard about is that you just upgrade to the 7.5, separate the stacks, and are able to run it as a separate systems. How that really works and how well it functions, obviously something you need to figure out with your partner. If that is something that you can do it, try it on a sandbox system to see, does this make sense? Because if you can just upgrade everything in place, then you would save a lot of time ensuring that everything is pointing to the new server and everything's working as expected. So that's definitely one of the things that you can do in a migration purpose. If you have that. Then one of the other things is I've been talking with some customers that have like 7.4 but is on the latest support package. Does it make sense to upgrade to a 7.5? And I think this really depends on what your strategy is for your integration, where you want to go with it. If you are in the process of doing a big migration or B2B migration, anything like that, probably makes sense. Some of the tools in the 7.5 is a lot better. You got the iFlow so is better, giving you a lot better view of what is actually happening in your system. But obviously some of these things may have been migrated down to the 7.4 system. So coding wise, I don't see that there's such a big difference. I think the three places, I will not count the last one, 3 places where there's a big difference. One is on the migration, on the 7.5 you got some better BPM tools, and as we talked about in some of the other videos, there may not be that much development going on in the B2B or in the BPM suite. So you may want to consider, do we want to create a lot of BPMs right now, or can we create it in, and that's probably the place where it makes the most sense to do a upgrade. That is if you want to run the cloud content on your own PI system, then that's really probably the best option to run, because you get some better options of running tools. And then the last is if you want to use the SAP test tool, but if your only purpose is to do testing better, I would recommend that you go for the FIGAF testing tool that would run on all 731 systems, 7.5 and 7.4 systems. So with that, if your only purpose is for upgrade is to get the test tool, I would probably just go for the FIGAF testing tool. It may cost you a little more, but you wouldn't save a project, you would save a lot of time, and I would probably argue you would get a better testing solution, but let's see what the final solution is. Oh, I guess that's really what I need to be saying. What's going on out there. But yeah, so that would be the only reasons that you want to upgrade. But obviously it depends from case to case what you want to do in these cases. And when we're talking 7.5 PO content, one of the things I've just been trying to deploy some content, and you cannot just take your cloud platform and just switch it to run on PO. There is some of the profiles and some of the settings that's done in the iFlows that's different, which means you would have to recreate some of the flows to get these new properties set. And that can be a little challenging, take a little time, but at least you will not have to develop everything from the scratch, and the more of the standard components you're working, the better. So I think one of the key requirements in this case is that you're able actually to upgrade pretty fast, and I don't know, it's like 4 times a year that they will create new content that you're able to apply it and see, at least if you have new development going on, then you can use it, because then it would not have such a big gap between what's in the cloud and what's on your own PI system. So be able to upgrade a lot more often is really crucial in this point. So that was something about the migration projects. And also there's the wildcard, the one where you're saying we got some old integration engine that we don't need anymore, that's no longer supported, a business connector or anything like that, or something completely different. We want to use the PI system. Does it make sense? If you're an SAP shop, I would say yes, because you're getting like 2 integration engines in one, both the PI for reliable messaging that's really fast, easy to monitor, and then you got the cloud content runtime, or whatever, cloud integration runtime, that is able to handle more complex flow, but requires that you do more development in ensuring that works as you expect it to. So those are the different things that you need to look into and to be able to So if you have that type of project, it's also a migration project that you need to work on and figure out how it actually makes sense. So now we'll talk a little about some of the different areas that make sense for doing migration. Then the next one where it makes sense is, or when you're starting your project, and you obviously, so I've created a blog post, and if you go to the integrationpodcast.com, you would find this episode, and in here you would actually be able to see get a link to some of my blog posts I've written about the topic, and be able to get some more inspiration. So I created a blog, I think it's called 7 Steps to a Migration, and where you're figuring out what actually you're achieving, just as we talked about before. Figure out some of what type of migration, what makes sense, how can we actually do these things. And then the next part is, once you know what you want to achieve, then you have to figure out how do we actually go around doing migration, what are the content that we have in our PO system, and what makes sense there. So one of the things I'm really happy to announce is that in the FIGAF ERT tool, we will add a free feature that would actually allow you to get an understanding of what are the message mappings that's being used in your PI system. And that makes really a lot of sense if you're doing either a B2B migration from Seeburger to B2B. And then with this, you can actually see what are the message mappings we're having, how many times have each been executed, because in the FIGAF tool we are able to so you would take the file with the Excel file that you can generate from the overview that shows you these are the interfaces that has been run this number of times. And what you can then do is you can take this file, put it into the ERT application. It would then match and figure out that you have run this interface, and because we know we can, based on your interfaces, we can find what are the message mappings that is executed in that one, and we can summarize for all of your message mapping how many times each has been updated and run, provided that the data is logged in this framework. So I think that's really an important tool. It's free. I expect it to be in the first release of the ERT in the new year, and there'll probably be a few iterations, just making sure that we support some different features on it. So be sure to sign up for the application so you can see what are the interfaces that you run in your scenario. And yeah, obviously this would be something I'd really love to charge for, because I think it's a valuable way of understanding your landscape. And with that in hand, you can say, okay, we have, obviously it will be ballpark figures that you will not be able to figure out precisely if you have made, so we will not be able to see the changes that you have made in the system and when a specific mapping was executed. So it's more like based on the number of interfaces that are run, how many times do we actually expect that this message has been executed. But this is something that you can actually use in your planning, because then you can say, okay, we got these message mapping, we got these 325 message mappings that's being executed X number of times. We can take when we're doing our migration, we can take, for instance, B2B migration, we can take the least critical ones, the ones that's only been executed like 3 times a week, and do migration of them. And once we have got those and seeing those works, we can do maybe some of the higher volumes or some of the more critical or less critical one. And with that, we will be able to scale our solution and make sure it works. So you can get it at figaf.com/IRT. It's part of the full ERT application. Or you can go to the integration podcast, see the resources there. Will also be putting a link there. But I think that's probably going to be one of the key tools that you want to use in any migration project, because, well, it gives you the information that you need there. And yeah. And also be able to show you how many XSLT Java mappings that you have in your landscape and how they're being executed. Also really important for the migration. So that was a little about what are the different things that you need to do. You need to figure out how these things are. You need to, once you got this report, you probably want to go and qualify each of them and saying this is so much critical and this is not critical, and what are the systems we want to do. So I think from a project planning perspective, it makes a lot of sense to take this, put in some extra fields and figure out what's important, and then you can actually follow up with new iteration of the report and check. So how do we actually do once we have migrated? Are we seeing that these values are dropping as fast as we're expecting, and stuff like that? So it will be really a useful tool to handle these things. So once you got that done, you have an idea about how many message mappings and interfaces you need to convert from one system or move from one system to the other, and you need to then you know. It will probably, if it's just a move, it probably will take an hour for each interface just to move it. If there's more development to be done, it will be like a day to day and a half. And also depending on how much documentation that you need to make for it to really work. And there, yeah, you need to figure out what are the level of documentation that we need, what do we have. At the FGAF tool, we are also adding some functionality. These would obviously be paid features that will at least enable you to do documentation a little easier of what you actually have done and are doing with the migration purposes. So that is one of the features or things. Then if you have these 500 message interfaces you need to convert, you can then start figuring out how many people do we need in place for this to work, get the people on board, and then start the migration, getting the new system installed, and onboarding consultants to help you in the process. But at least now you have a prioritized list of what are the interfaces we need to move first, and why do we want to move these. So I'm not gonna lie, it's not gonna be an easy thing, and I think that's probably the big thing about some migration project, that it's difficult getting the business really excited about and say, yeah, this is really cool. You're spending 3 months, a year and a half doing a migration or patch upgrade, and the only reason you're doing it is to be able to support these new adapters or some new features, or just to stay current, and you would not be able to help us with any of the business requirements that we have coming. So it's going to be hard selling, but I guess the alternative is not what they want either, that you are neither able to fulfill their requirements or be able to solve the needs as they have, or even have a system that breaks down under stress. But if you migrate, you'll have a better understanding what's going on and be able to solve the issues a lot faster. So I think that's the key consideration of a migration project. It's not add more of a business value. We'll just make sure that you stay current, have the latest system in place, have are able to support the most modern functionalities that you want and the business want, and then you can start doing the migration. If you have any CC BPMs or BPMs, well, if you're just doing an upgrade with the BPMN, I would not do anything with those. If you have CC BPMs, I would definitely consider it makes sense, and can we make this in a CPI content deployed on local, or how do we actually get around supporting these patterns? And there may be a lot of different cases that you can actually figure out how do we actually solve these issues in a easier way. So I would really wish you good luck with the migration project. I hope that some of the resources you can find at the integrationpodcast.com makes a lot of sense to you. There's also a place you can enter your name and email address to get some of the more updates on what we're doing, get the latest tool when we are delivering it, and then more importantly, get some of the resources that I've done that where it makes sense for integration developers to use for these things. So with that, I just wanted to say goodbye. Thanks for this year, and thanks for supporting the Integration Podcast. If you liked it, appreciate it, please share it with your friends and family. Well, probably more your friends. I don't think that... I know that my mama is not listening to this podcast, unfortunately. But I think she'll probably not find it that useful. But do share it on LinkedIn. That really makes my day when someone says, hey, cool episode. This was what I actually needed for migration project for figuring out what's going on. And if there's any features or functionalities, features or more topics that you wanted to cover in this, please send me a note, and I'll see if that would be possible to find someone that can shed a little light on these things. So thanks for joining. Happy New Year, and see you in the new year.